Hey guys, I'm Chris Northover, and I've been here riding this new Triumph Thruxton RS. Now, the Thruxton is a legendary name. It's a bike that has been around for years. It's one of Triumph's great heritage bikes. A little bit of history now. The Thruxton name actually comes from Triumph producing factory special engines for racing back in the 60s. And what you could do is you could buy one of these bikes for a dealer bike series, and Triumph would supply you a factory engine that gave you a little bit more power, and it's kind of an unofficial, official way of cheating to get the things to perform and win the races. Now, you don't see any of these in MotoGP anymore, and the Thruxton has now become an iconic cafe racer, a bike to represent a real iconic era of motorcycles, of kids racing back and forth from cafes, the ton-up kids doing 100 mile an hour down the bypasses and the North Circular in London. And it's like an iconic era that people throw back to, and this bike kind of represents that. But these new Thruxtons are a little bit more than that. Back in 2006, Triumph introduced the Bonneville range, the modern classics. You had bikes like the Bonneville, the SE, the T100, and they were very classically styled and classically performing bikes. They were reliable, they were modern bikes, but they were heavy, they weren't that fast, and the handling was authentically classic, which is a nice way of saying you bought one because it looked good, not because you wanted to go around turns fast. Now fast forward to modern era, 2016, these latest Thruxtons are a much different bike and a much different performance. They're now designed to be a sports classic bike. They corner well, they go fast, and they handle properly with modern brakes and modern components. That means looking this good doesn't come with the compromises that it used to do. Enter the new Thruxton RS, and it's an evolution of that bike. It's not completely different to the outgoing Thruxton R. In fact, the Thruxton R still sits beside it in the range. The RS is the icing on the cake, the next step if you want that little bit more performance and a little bit more specification on your bike. So what do you get with the RS? Well, they've done a lot of work on the motor. Power is now up to 103 horsepower, but they've also reduced the inertia, so it's an engine that revs up faster, and that for me tells a bigger story than the power itself. When an engine revs quicker, it's more responsive. The bike feels faster everywhere because it feels like it wants to go, rather than that kind of lazy approach. To achieve this, they've actually done a lot of work on this engine. They've got a lighter crankshaft. They've got a lighter alternator using a rare earth magnet. They've changed the engine cases. They're now thin wall engine cases, magnesium cam cover. The camshafts are a 5% higher lift, and they've altered the cam timing. Now all this work has gone to improve engine performance and address some of the things that people weren't so enamored with on the Thruxton R. One of those was the rev limit. The previous generation of this engine revved really hard and then crashed into the rev limiter. And so if you were riding fast, you quite often felt stopped abruptly when you hit the rev limiter. Triumph has listened to that. They've given you 500 RPM more to play with. And out on the roads today, I didn't touch the rev limiter once. You had a real spread of power, ride up high, roll off, tip into the turn, and roll up back on for the next straight. Never had a problem with that rev limiter. Now those of you who like to look at graphs and are into your techie stuff, if you go and look up the power curves for these bikes, you will see that actually there's now a dip in the power curve compared to the old model, just around 4,000 RPM, about 4,500 RPM in fact, up to 5,750. After 5,750, the power is much stronger on the new RS than it was on the old bike. That is proof of the trade-off. Nothing comes for free. If you want the power up top, you want those extra revs, the cam timing actually costs you a little bit down low. So there's a fractional loss of power. And again, I spotted this on the graph, and then riding the bike, I couldn't tell you if it was there or not. I never felt it on the road, so I don't think it's a negative, but sometimes it's an interesting insight to see where that power's come from. Okay, so all this new spec, new power, new engine, that's fantastic, that's great to know. What is it actually like to ride? Now the first time you jump on one of these Thruxton Rs or the new Thruxton RS like this one, you can't get around the fact that it's a racing styled bike. It makes you feel like you're gonna go out and do a 60s retro TT. It's not a sitting up, cruising to the shops type of bike. It's a sporty riding position. It's a race style bike, just an old race style bike. Now, if you embrace that, if you get used to the crouch, sit right down into it, it's actually pretty comfy. I never had a problem all day with aching wrists or anything like that, but I think if you resist it, if you try and sit up and try and keep your head high, then you'll find it pretty uncomfortable pretty quickly. If you're gonna ride a Thruxton, you've got to get the Thruxton in your head, get down and get after it. Now, out on the roads, I'm gonna say it, this thing goes way faster than anything looking this cool has any right to. We quickly found ourselves barreling into turns, hard on the brakes, cranking right over to the edge of the tire, drive out the corner, brake again. And within like half an hour, you're thinking, I don't feel like I'm on a retro bike. I don't feel like I'm on a cool posers cafe racer. I felt like I was on a sports bike. And that's probably the biggest compliment I can pay to this thing. Because at the end of the day, it's got a big 1200cc parallel engine. It's a steel frame and twin shocks. We're not on latest technology here in terms of the setup and design of the chassis, but it really performs like one. The one difference is you have to work hard to get the best out of this bike. Maybe I got wrapped up in the sunshine and the excitement, but for me, that's a good thing. On this, going fast means you've got to put some effort in. You've got to muscle the bike around. You've got to plan your lines. And then it's so rewarding when you get it right. Compare that to riding the same roads on a full-blown sports bike, and you end up just going faster and faster and faster, and in all honesty, the bike looks at you and goes, I can do this all day. Riding something like this, I find way more involving, way more exciting, and at the end of the day, you feel like you've had a really good ride, and like you've earned your curves. So can we come to some drawbacks of the bike? Again, it's not like there's a performance that you've got to achieve with this. It's not going racing, it's not adventuring across the desert. This is a motorcycle for motorcycling's sake. It's fun, it looks good, and it makes every ride enjoyable. Now, for sure, the wind protection's not amazing, and likewise, it's not going to be super comfortable if you want to sit on a freeway for 3 hours doing 55 miles an hour. This isn't the bike for that stuff, and if you're using it for that, it's going to seem pretty uncomfortable pretty quickly. Riding it hard in those turns, the one time I did start to get the chassis a little bit upset was when you were braking into a bumpy corner. At that point, the brakes, the lean angle, the bumps, everything started to get a little bit of a fight on, and it kind of took a little bit to get the bike settled and turning in. That again is more a byproduct of how fast you end up riding this bike, because it eggs you on, rather than a criticism of what the bike actually does. So to summarize, new Thruxton RS. If you're a Thruxton person already, oh, this is great news for you. It's a bit more performance, a bit more speed, and it still looks as awesome as ever. If you've not had to go on one of these modern sport classic bikes, I urge you to get out and give one a go. You can't write these off claiming that the performance is boring and slow anymore. These things are a proper modern, fast sports bike that are an absolute riot to ride on the road and make every journey something that you feel a part of rather than just a passenger.